Cops and other law enforcement officers, tell us about cases where you felt something supernatural or paranormal was happening. I am a former emergency services worker, a firefighter. One night we received a call to check on the health of a person who dialed 911 but was not responding to the operator. We arrived at the address. The house was somewhat strange, and a little old lady met us at the door and greeted us. We asked her if she knew who called 911, but she replied that she had been living alone since her husband passed away. We had barely returned to the station when another call came in from the same address. We headed back, talked to the old lady again, and left once more. Just as we were returning to the station, the same call came in again, the same address, and no response. We went there again, thinking that the old lady might be a bit confused. But this time when we approached the door, the old lady was no longer on the doorstep. We rang the doorbell, no answer. It turned out the door was unlocked. We looked inside and saw the old lady was lying on the floor and not breathing. We immediately administered first aid and took her to the hospital, but she was in stable condition. Waking up in the ambulance, she kept insisting that she hadn't called us and that we arrived almost immediately after she lost consciousness. It's a 15-minute drive from the station to her house. Before taking her to the hospital, she asked me and another emergency worker if we could bring her knitting needles and some clothes to the hospital. I said I would pick up her things because I had a friend living in that area whom we were planning to meet anyway. In short, I pick up my friend and we head to the grandma's house. I ran into the house to grab the bag with the things and the knitting needles while my friend stayed in the car. And just as I was leaving the house, I swear I felt someone's hand on my back and heard a voice saying, "Thank you." When I got back to the car, my friend asked why the grandma's husband couldn't take her things to the hospital himself. I said that her husband was dead, to which my friend replied, "Then who was that old man in the window who smiled and waved at me?" At first, I refused to believe in anything supernatural, so I called the police and asked them to check the house. I thought someone had broken in. They didn't find anything unusual, and there was no one inside. Later, my friend and I went to the grandmother's house. He started describing the old man who was standing in the window, but the old lady, not letting him continue, immediately began to cry and said, "That's my Harold." Right now, tears are literally welling up through my fear. It's easy to dismiss ghost stories until something like that happens to you personally. I am an emergency worker, and one day we were called to a local shopping mall. We arrived and found out that an 8-year-old girl was having trouble breathing. It was late at night and her mother, aunt and cousin had just been caught shoplifting. We assumed that the breathing problems were caused by stress. As soon as we got into the car, the girl looked into my partners and my eyes and said that the place where she lives is bad. She said she lives surrounded by demons, and I swear by my ass, as soon as she mentioned demons, her pulse dropped from 90 to 45 beats per minute in a matter of seconds. My partner and I exchanged glances and immediately started trying to defuse the situation. In the end, the girl came to her senses. I will never forget this incident. Edited. As soon as we stabilized her condition, of course, we immediately reported everything to the police. Not my story, but when I read it, I was quite shocked. An old lady called 911 and asked to send some police officers to her home because she saw a strange figure hiding in her backyard. She lived alone and that night felt in danger after seeing someone's silhouette in the window. When the police arrived, the door was unlocked. They entered the house, saw the old lady sitting facing the window and went to check the backyard. There were no signs of forced entry and nothing was missing. There was a tall fence around the house, making it nearly impossible for anyone to enter the property. Anyone at all. Nevertheless, the cops found footprints inside the house. It's quite likely that she left the door unlocked and saw someone not outside through the window, but in its reflection inside the house behind her. I was in Afghanistan standing guard duty. Suddenly, I turned towards the farmer's field and saw a huge panther there. This creature seemed to be about 10 meters long. My heart started pounding like crazy. I was about to report it to my team over the radio when I suddenly realized I needed to turn off the depth perception on the night vision goggles. Afterwards, I immediately saw an ordinary cat about 40 centimeters or so sitting on the ledge of the guard booth. The best day in the cat's life. In short, one scared a Marine to death. Yeah guys, it was a fun day and probably the funniest moment in my life. But maybe, except for the time when I dropped a clump of fur into his coffee mug or when I knocked grenades off the table, that was fun too. I'm a paramedic, a firefighter. One late summer night, we went on a call to a rural area. My partner and I were driving along a winding 2-lane highway, in the middle of complete unknown. No lighting except for the headlights and the moon. We approach a sharp right turn, and suddenly I see a man moving in the tall grass. He is moving very quickly and smoothly, as if riding a bicycle while standing. His arms and torso are bouncing or moving up and down like when running. In short, I was a bit stunned and confused seeing a guy in the middle of the night cutting through the grass on a bike. But yeah, okay. Then he approaches a tree and stops. Around this moment, we drive past him. I look out the window and see him standing next to the tree without a bicycle or anything else. He's just standing there watching the truck pass by. My hair stood on end. We keep driving and I decide to ask my partner if he saw that guy. His response: "Bro, I thought I was losing my mind." This case is very difficult to explain. And yes, perhaps it was just a coincidence, but to this day I never tell my colleagues about it. For some time I worked as a homicide investigator. We dealt with all presumed suicides, investigating them to make sure they were not murders. Usually we would determine the motive for the suicide and find a note or another sign indicating that the person took their own life. For example, one guy stupidly taped the note to his chest that read, "Well, bitch, are you happy now?" and arranged everything so that his wife would be the first to find him after he hanged himself. But sometimes there are cases where all the evidence points to the fact that the person committed suicide. Yet there is no note or discernible reason why this person might have taken their own life. These people have good health, decent jobs, and at first glance a happy family life. But who knows what is really going on with people? And now I'll tell you about that very case that still sends shivers down my spine. Throughout my career, there have been about 10 suicides where the motive was not obvious. In the last 3 such cases, I found the same thing at the crime scene. It was a small, decorative woven lighthouse that appeared at all the locations. The same lighthouse with the identical design. It was painted in white and blue. The first time it stuck in my mind because I was standing by the bed where the body lay, but 2 weeks later I saw the same damn lighthouse at another suicide and even mentioned this coincidence to the patrol officer. A few months later I went to investigate another suicide and saw the same woven lighthouse. It clicked for me then that these were always unexplained suicides. I went back to the station and started reviewing all the photos from the scenes of each suicide I had worked on. In 2 of them I saw in the photos what might be this woven lighthouse, but the angle of the photo was poor and there was too much clutter around to be sure. I don't know guys, it seemed damn creepy to me, but a couple of months later I transferred and stopped thinking about it. Edited. You're asking if it might have been a serial killer? You know, I really doubt it. These were all obvious suicides, most of which didn't have an adequate alternative explanation. We always worked on each suicide as if it were a murder. A presumed suicide almost always is a suicide, but we always double check anyway. Moreover, despite the fact that there are actually more serial killers than you think, they rarely leave calling cards or anything like that, as is usually shown in movies. Usually it's some crazy guy with a distinctive style. I really think it was just a strange coincidence, but in any case, it was incredibly creepy. Dude, at this rate, you'll wake up one night and see that decorative woven lighthouse on your bedside table. I would immediately freak out. You should find that damn lighthouse and burn it to hell. It never occurred to me that it was the same lighthouse. I thought it was some kind of seasonal decoration sold at the pottery shop. I worked in emergency services for a while. One day we received a call saying that some guy was riding a bike without a helmet at a wild speed and crashed into a car. We immediately arrived at the scene. Despite it being a Saturday and happening in the center of the suburb, no one even approached to check on the poor guy. Seriously, the streets were completely empty. Usually in such cases a crowd of onlookers gathers around, but not this time. In short, the victim had a severely fractured skull. He showed no signs of life. I had never seen a more serious head injury in my life. According to our preliminary assessment, he had a serious skull fracture, a concussion, and also significant bleeding. He was also missing some teeth and had numerous abrasions from sliding on the asphalt, but fortunately not all of his skin was scraped off. To give you an idea, it looks so bad that most people wouldn't survive something like that. And if anyone did survive, they would be a vegetable for the rest of their life. In a normal situation, we would have moved him from the road to the sidewalk, but when someone has a head or neck injury, moving them is extremely dangerous. My partner, who was more experienced and was training me since I was still kind of new, went to check his pulse while I started getting our equipment out. He crouched down, held his finger on the pulse for a while, and then stood up and was just about to say something when suddenly this guy jumped up. But he didn't even use his hands to get up. He just jumped up on his feet. My partner and I were scared as hell. The guy looked at us, smiled, and tried to lift the bike. We tried to stop him, but considering his condition, we didn't want to wrestle with him. He took off from us and just ran into the forest, leaving his bike behind. My partner was even more shocked than I was. He stood there with his mouth open, watching where the guy was going. Then he turned to me and muttered, "Dude, he didn't have a pulse, damn it." I asked if he was sure about that, and he swore by everything he had that the biker was clinically dead. We reached out to the authorities for help, and they sent a search and rescue team into the forest. I don't know if they found him or not because we usually don't get any information about patients after they are handed over to the doctors. My best guess about what happened is that the guy with a clouded mind decided to head to his beloved's house. People usually bleed profusely from head injuries, so I assume the guy left a long red bloody trail that the cops were able to follow. Thank you very much for watching. In the comments, police officers and other law enforcement personnel share stories about cases where you felt something supernatural or paranormal was happening. And don't forget to check out our other episodes. Goodbye.